So, I thought you had to grow stuff, right? But then Katie is one of our ag business specialists. She helps people organize their thoughts and idea, because when you're having like this urge to start a business, you do not know where to start because it feels overwhelming. You have all these thoughts, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that. So Katie has that special set of skills that will help you. Hey, I'm going to help you land it on a piece of paper, right? On a business plan. And she also knows about, okay, you have this idea, let's look at the market. Is there a market for that? And then she has a special set of skills that will tell you like how to run a business, right? Which I'm not that great at. So with that said, I'm just introducing Katie. Where's your coverage area?
Oh gosh. So I cover I-70 is my southern border, kind of 36 highway is my northern border, all the way east to like Saline, Sheridan County, so like that direction for a while. And then to the state line. So that little kind of square in the middle of the north central Missouri. So I have about 13 counties that I cover. So, but I'm housed in Lafayette County and I live in Lafayette County, so not too far away from here.
Yeah. So any ag business related question that you have, be it specialty crop, row crops, livestock, right? She can help you with that.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Katie.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. So I'll give you guys a little bit more of my background than what Juan just did. So I've been with Extension now for almost 8 years. Before Extension, I kind of was like a roaming gnome in a way. I kind of had a couple different careers before I landed here, but my background is uniquely situated to my position because for this, I worked at a bank and was a lender and a banker. And before that, I managed a farm store. So I was a retail store manager. So I didn't like matriculate through higher education. So a lot of like real world practical experience, like on the work side of my life. And then on the other work side of my life, my husband and I have a cow-calf operation in Lafayette County. So we run anywhere between, our herd size fluctuates between 40 and 65 head of Angus and Angus cross cattle. We also do a little bit of row crop that my father-in-law owns, and we have our own custom haying operation too. So we also are tenants. We rent a lot of the land that we run our cattle on and hay. So I've kind of got all those kind of tricks up my sleeve too, or that practical experience from the operation side of things. I also have horses and chickens that we don't make any money on either one of those, but we have all of the things. So I'd like to, since it's such a small group, like I don't want to stand up here and just like PowerPoint you to death all night. I don't know if we'll be here for 3 hours. We'll just kind of let the conversation lead us where it does. Sometimes that's a little bit better, especially with a small group. I want you guys to get what you need out of the conversation, not necessarily me just like telling you what I think you should know. So I'd love to just go around the room real quick. If you could just kind of like share like a little bit about maybe your background and what your kind of aspirations are in agriculture, and then that way we can make sure we address those aspirations. So anybody want to go first?
I'm right here, I'll do it.
Okay.
I'm Andy. I don't have much of a background at all, other than like just, I don't know. We're all veterans here, so I don't think I have to say that. Right now I do help my medical marijuana caregiver grow his plants. So I'm learning about, he does organic live soil, and really all I do is like pH his water and trim for him all the time. But it's neat to learn that kind of stuff. I'd like to take this business model and try to put it together. I think I'd be dumb not to take this opportunity because I don't really do much else with anything. if the laws changed, I'd grow cannabis, but I think I don't know what I want to grow right now. I got friends that are like hippies and run a store that I could probably wholesale like hippie herbs to and stuff like that. So that's like one thing. It doesn't have to be this, like, I understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be basil and tomatoes. I can get creative if I want.
Okay, well, great. We talk to a lot of people that are just kind of like, I have this vague idea of something that I want to do, but I really don't have much.
I have no idea how to do a business thing. Like,
Yeah,
I've never thought of that in my life.
So, okay, well, great.
I'll go next. I'm Sarah. I grew up gardening with my dad, so my grandpa as well. He's always grown zucchini, tomatoes, banana peppers, you name it, we probably have it. Currently I have a 12 by 12 U-shaped garden in the backyard. Once again, if you can think it, I probably have it. And now I'm looking into, one, how to do it in the winter, so that's where the hydroponics kind of come in. And then looking at getting land someday for the chickens and the horses and everything, expanding the garden and being able to market it now. I've started to sell some tomatoes and basil and some peppers, and really looking at what that can grow into. I'm one of those people that's kind of no stone unturned, so I'm happy to look into anything just to make it work.
Okay.
My name is Mike. I have absolutely no background in farming or even gardening. But I'd like to be able to do some stuff like that for myself. Be able to grow healthy and productive food for myself as I get older. It'd be nice if I got to the point where I had enough where I could share with friends and neighbors. Ideally, I'd like to have enough where I could donate some of it to like some homeless facilities. One thing most people are lacking, there's a lot of things people in that situation lacking, but a decent diet is one of them. And that goes a long way towards mental health, I think.
Yeah.
So, that's one of them.
My name's Gary. I sold auto parts for 22 years after I got out of the Marine Corps. Shortly before I got out of doing that, I got into fermenting stuff for the health reasons, diet and all that kind of stuff. And I saw huge gains personally. And there's several things in the fermentation world that, like anything else, the quality of the vegetables you start with is definitely going to affect the end product. And nobody in Kansas City wants to grow Napa cabbage, and that's the cabbage you need to make kimchi. So I was like, aha, with the Dutch buckets and all that, and I like to make pickles too with cucumbers. So the vining crops and the Dutch buckets, and I'm going to try and put something together. Like the end result is I want to sell people fermented vegetables.
I know a grower in Northwest Missouri that does fermented products. So there are other people doing that.
Yeah,
so.
there are, and I've tasted quite a few of them done in the state, and somebody doesn't have it figured out. I've like, you're the person, this is the thing, we need to make it happen. Because I've got it figured out how to make it. I just don't know how to realistically put it all together.
Scale it up. Okay, great.
My name's Charlie. I guess for the last few years I've just been working full time, but I decided now was the time to finish my degree. I've got 6 hours to finish, so
Great.
should be done this semester. But I saw this opportunity posting and decided I did want to learn about sort of vertical farming or urban farming techniques. Got an unfinished basement. Envision maybe using it just to see what I can grow.
Well, good. So I think hopefully you all will walk away with this with like some kind of knowledge gained or gleaned. And if I get too far off in any direction, just reel me back in. And if we, like I said, if we don't follow the slides exactly, I'm completely okay with that. So the first kind of like topic I want to talk about is this business planning for small acreage. And this actually, I have a guide sheet that goes along with it that we wrote last year, so I'll pass this out too, so that way you don't feel like you have to write down every little thing, because most of it is covered in here, and you get to take those home with you. But the reason this kind of topic came about is, one, I get a lot of phone calls because I think I'm so close to Kansas City Metro, and there's this reemergence and renewed interest in kind of small farms and getting back out and getting in touch with growing your own food. So the first kind of thing I'd like to ask the group here is, like, when you hear small farm, like, what does that mean to you? Like, what defines it?
It can be any, I mean, I deal with so many people at the farmer's market that some of them aren't growing on, they're growing on really small plots.
Mm-hmm.
So it can really be anything, you know.
Oh, and the corporate backing.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because it really depends on, like, the scenario and what you're doing. So, a small livestock operation would be, huge for a specialty crop grower. So, someone can't raise cattle on 20 acres, but you can grow a heck of a lot of vegetables on 20 acres. Too many, really. Like, you don't need that, nowhere near that amount of land. So it really depends on what you're wanting to do, like what the size and scope of the piece of land that you need. Some people say, oh, it's how much money you make, Well, not necessarily true. There's 23,595 farms that report less than $10,000 in receipts. That's quarter of all the farms in Missouri are pulling in less than $10,000 a year. So the amount of money being made by farms doesn't necessarily reflect the amount of acreage that they're farming either. So and then some people say, oh, well, it's the size. 100 acres is a big farm, or 1,000 acres is a big farm, or 1 acre is a big farm. So there's just under 26,000 farms are less than 50 acres, and that's 30% of all the farms in the state. So most, a quarter of the farms in Missouri are, have a small footprint, and they're not really bringing in a lot of dollars, but they're still farms. Missouri is the number 2 in the country for farms. We come in behind Texas. So, second.
As far as number of farms?
Yeah, as far as number of farms in the state, we are the second largest in the country. So most people don't know that. There's trivia for you. You can go home and say, like, I learned this one thing. So it really depends, what that small farm is. And so we put this guide together because you talk to a lot of people and they have plans, right? I'm going to do this in the future. So I really like this quote from Eisenhower. It kind of reflects my thoughts on plans. Plans are nothing, but planning is everything. So plans always seem to be this kind of like down the road, kind of foggy idea of something that's going to happen. But once you actually start planning and writing down on paper, kind of what I want to do and set some concrete goals and timelines to get there, all of a sudden that kind of fuzzy abstract starts to really get clearer and, might be able to be more attainable. So the first thing I always like to do is when I start any conversation with anybody, I do a lot of like one-on-one consultations with landowners or farmers. And the first thing I always ask them, really no matter where they're at in their like business plan, if they've just started or if they're been doing it for 10 years and are trying to get a grant or wanting to know if it's time to scale their production up or buy a piece of equipment, it's always this question comes first to mind. It's what is your goal? Like, what do you want to set out to achieve? And then how do you make it happen? Because once you start to define your goal, you can kind of start to really like figure out the steps you need to take to make it happen. So, the first question I might ask this group here, because you're all in this kind of, I've got this idea and I need to figure out how to make it, materialize, is, why do you want to start your business? And there's a lot of different reasons, and people have different reasons for wanting to start the business. We kind of heard it here in this room, and your thoughts kind of reflect a lot of the reasons why. So when we look at, people that talk to me, one of the first things they say, not so much applying to this group, is they want to diversify. So they might want to like move back to the family farm, mom and dad or grandma and grandpa have a row crop farm, but they can't make a living off of that farm. That farm's only supporting one family, but if we added a different enterprise or a different revenue stream, we might be able to, carve out 10 acres and make our own living there. So the next thing is we just would like to supplement our income. Maybe we've got another source of income or we're retired, but it's just nice to have a little bit of extra, a little bit of something to do. And other people, it wants to be their goal is for it to be their primary income source. Like we'd like to eventually be able to quit our jobs and farm full time. So it just kind of depends on what their objectives are. So the next group is kind of these people that just have like fond memories or really like want to be good stewards of the land. Like we want to go back and take care of our parents' property, and we want to see it, continue to be farming and producing something, and we want something to leave to our kids. We want to manage it correctly. Those kind of people that just want to really take care of the land and be good stewards for future generations. So, and then there's another group that really wants to be self-sufficient. So this really, really came to light during COVID with the food shortages that we saw and kind of the disruptions to our food chains. Because it's probably I know in my lifetime, that was kind of like a very rude awakening to walk into a grocery store and the shelves are empty. Like that's never happened in America before. And, different parts of the world experience that all the time. But for us who are kind of spoiled in a way, like we didn't deal with that. And so a lot of people are like, I can grow this myself. I need to not depend so much on, our food chain because it was a pandemic this time, but what's the next thing that's going to disrupt that for us? We would be able to have a little bit of something to fall back on. So, and then some people, it's just a lifestyle. They just enjoy it. They enjoy growing things. They enjoy being outdoors and raising food. And it's kind of almost like a little bit of it's a community service, but you do feel like you're contributing to a community. So when you grow food or, participate in agriculture. So as you think through those goals, you kind of jot some things down, and that might kind of turn into like your grander mission. So like you said, I'd like to be able to donate a little bit of what I grow maybe back. So if that's one of your goals, then you kind of figure out how do I make that happen? How do I, structure my business, or how do I operate? So maybe what that looks like is I sell so much, but then I donate so much every week to a food bank, or as long as I'm covering my costs, I'm happy. I don't do it to make a lot of money, but it's to give back. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, in my case, I don't anticipate making any kind of money on it. Really,
yeah.
It's just more.
And there are some really, really neat businesses in Kansas City that they kind of have almost like a 3-pronged business approach. The first is sales. The second is like food hubs. The third is donation, or they buy produce or they get produce donated to them, and then they pick through it. And I can't remember the name. Do you remember the name of that group? I have it written down. But they get produce either bought at a discounted rate or donated to them. They go through and basically grade it again, and the best gets sold. The seconds get fed to animals for animal feed, and then the third turns into compost. But it's not Cultivate KC. I'd have to look it up. But it's just, there's some interesting business models out there, and like there's some very interesting like cooperative things happening in Kansas City around food systems too, so you don't feel like you're just out there by yourself. So some neat groups to get tied into. So the next question becomes kind of, what do I produce? And if I had $1 for every time someone told me, like, can you tell me what I need to grow so I can like farm full time? I say no, but when you figure it out, let me know, because I'm gonna do that too. So I always, you need to put some thought through it. And this isn't so much like what's gonna make you the most money, but it's also gonna be like, what do you enjoy? Because if you don't like doing it, you're not gonna wanna stick with it. That's kind of anything in life, right? So this, I know that it's kind of small print, it's hard to read. It's in the handout too, but I like this slide because it shows you like, you can do a lot of things in small agriculture, in small scale agriculture. So, and you guys kind of mentioned some things too. So obviously kind of your vegetable production, your traditional like backyard gardens, your tomatoes, your cucumbers, your peppers, all of that stuff, you know, that kind of also ties in with fruits, melons, berries, you know, maybe it's a little bit of like horticulture or nursery, like maybe I want to plant some mums too, or do a little bit of bedding plants. But then you've also got some other areas I think that people don't always think about. So not so much forest products around here. We do have a lot of timber in the southern part of the state, but you've got livestock and poultry. You can do that small scale or relatively small scale. A lot of people, you know, eggs and meat birds for chickens. But then you can do like value-added agricultural services, like maybe it's, you know, doing some like consulting gardening kind of types of ag services, or, you know, working with a cooperative or something like that. And we see a lot of practices kind of stacked on top of each other as people like figure out the growing piece. They'll start to kind of stack these different enterprises. So a good example of that is like you start growing your vegetables and maybe your berries. And then you're like, hey, I'm doing this really well. I'm growing enough that I can start doing like some value added production and turning those into jams or jellies, or, you know, fermenting them, because not only then do I have fresh items to sell, but then I also have shelf stable products that like helps with my cash flow throughout the year. And then you're like, okay, well, I'm doing this now, and now I'm doing my jams and jellies, and I have this great big berry patch. So let's do some agritourism now on top of that too, and have people out and have them pick the berries, or, you know, so you kind of see the really, really successful small, you know, or, you know, small businesses kind of have a couple products or a couple enterprises stacked on top of each other, but it takes them time to get there. So that's why we go back to the goals and say, okay, what are your first 3? And then once we get those, then you regroup. And what's the next 3? Because the worst thing you want to do, and I get calls all the time, and I know Juan does too, it's like, okay, I'm going to start doing this, and I'm going to grow hydroponic lettuce, and oh, I'm going to do some aquaponics too, so I'm going to bring in some fish on top of that, and then I'm going to do like 5 things at once. And then it's like, okay, well, do you have any experience? No, I don't have any experience. Like, okay, well, let's start with one thing. So let's start growing some lettuce. And once we get that figured out, then maybe let's add this next piece. And then once we get that figured out and the kinks worked out, then let's add this next piece, but let's not try to like drink from a fire hose because you're gonna drown yourself, kind of thing. So you can like start to think, you know, how do I grow? But you know, through setting goals and then putting timelines to them too. It's like, okay, I'm gonna start here, but in 3 years I wanna be here. Or in 5 years I wanna be here. So, makes sense? Any questions?
One of the little ideas, and I like that this slide, because one of the ideas I had before I started anything was just like, start a little, like not bond mowing company, but like, hey, do you want to farm in your backyard but don't know how? I took a class. And then I could just have like 7 or 10 clients and just drive around throughout the week and farm at their house. Because I don't have a house to farm at.
There's guys on the internet doing that.
Doing that?
Gardening in yards in their neighborhoods,
All right.
splitting the produce with their neighbors. You know?
So
Because a lot of people live in communities where they don't know. So.
no, you're fine. I had a really interesting conversation on Tuesday, just up the road, not too far from here, and it was talking about how do you start to form a land bank in urban agriculture, you know, people that might have an acre or 2 that they would like to farm, but an acre is a lot for one person to take care of. And then how do you, you know, put that up in some sort of a website or, you know, information sharing site to where then like someone else who's looking for opportunities to farm, who's either maxed out of their space or doesn't have space, can then go to and say, hey, this person's, they're half a mile down the road from me, or that's really close to where,
I don't know if you can do it in Missouri, but I've read in say Mother Earth News or whatever several years ago, there are people that are finding easement spots that are under power lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like where the city doesn't necessarily want to come in there and mow.
Mm-hmm.
You can get, I don't know what you have to do in Missouri to do it, but you can get a grant, not a grant, but a permission
Mm-hmm.
to come in there and farm some of those spaces.
Yeah,
Two
so,
of those are good.
yeah, the community garden spaces and places like that. And a lot of times people are all for it, but they don't want to manage it. Like churches are kind of notorious for having like a lot of green space potentially on their properties. They might not want to be the ones that are like out there taking care of it, but they would be more than willing to say, oh, we'll partner with you as an organization, and then you can come in and garden. We don't mind dedicating this like 50 by 100 piece of ground for you to do this here. And it's just kind of figuring out those partnerships and those opportunities. And a lot of that also involves kind of what we're talking about today. Those aren't necessarily businesses in the traditional sense of the word, but it still requires planning and proposals and really like being organized and having your ducks in a row, so that way when you go and do your pitch and you say, hey, I've got this idea, you've got this piece of property and you're just mowing it right now and that's costing you money to pay for that service. What if we came in and did a community garden? And what we're going to do there is we're gonna grow some food. Maybe we sell every Sunday after church gets out, but then we donate so much of it to a food bank. And if that church has a food bank, that's a win-win, because then they're adding fresh produce to their offerings to those needy individuals who are not getting that currently, because they're probably getting boxed macaroni and canned green beans. So, but it's kind of thinking through sometimes, it doesn't necessarily take a lot of dollars. It just takes some thought and some planning, and then like developing that marketing pitch or that marketing plan to where you're not like, oh, we could do this garden, but I don't know how it's going to happen. Like you kind of go in and say, okay, I've got my ducks in a row. I've thought it through. It's going to cost $500. I'm just totally throwing that out there, for us to get up and going and seed and soil amendments, and we might need to go get a tiller, kind of some things squared away in order to get that started. So I've got a couple of different examples of like some of the questions you might need to think through like before you kind of start your business. And I actually have a tool I'm going to share here in a little bit that really helps answer some of those questions, and so you don't have to think of these questions yourselves necessarily. But so like most people that I talk to are interested in like horticulture, nursery types of crops. And so the first question is like, what kind of production system am I going to use? Most people start out just, like planting in bare earth, but then they say, well, I could really extend my growing season if I put in some, high tunnels or caterpillar tunnels, which does anybody know what a caterpillar tunnel is?
Okay. It's used for cabbage.
So caterpillar tunnels are like little high tunnels. So it's just, it can usually make it out of like flexible, like PVC tubing or PEX tubing. And they might just be, 2 or 3 feet off the ground, maybe, 10, 15 feet long, however long they need to be. And they're little like plant huts. You just set them over your plants and it gives them a protected environment to get started. And then they're very easily movable. They're not anything permanent. So they kind of allow you to extend your growing season a little bit more than what you would do if you were just planting out in an open field. Did I get that right, Juan?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yay. Definition of caterpillar.
They're not permanent structures.
Yeah.
You really only need to use them during the cabbage moth season when they're out there laying larvae and bracts.
And sometimes they just put like the PVC film on top, or some people will do this plotted on fabric.
Yeah.
That's pretty much
Or like I've seen sometimes, well, not so much tunnels, but like strawberries, or like if you're getting like a really early warm spell, like we had that last winter where it got like super warm way too early. And so I know the people close to us that have a big strawberry you pick, they were out covering their berries with black fabric because they wanted to keep them like out of the sun, because they're like, it's not time for you all to wake up yet. You need to stay sleeping for a little bit longer. But then, you know, some people want to go, you know, over to the greenhouse. They want to be fully climate controlled. They want to be able to grow, you know, 365 days a year or close to it. But as you move through these different production systems, there's going to be additional costs. So, you know, open field, there's going to be minimal cost for that type of production system compared to the investment with a high tunnel, which is going to be kind of a medium investment, versus the investment in a greenhouse, where then you're going to have to figure out how to heat it, utilities, you know, that's a very permanent structure there. So then kind of a next question you might want to think through with horticulture crops is, you know, do I have, you know, adequate labor to plant, maintain, and harvest the crop? Like, you talk to people, they're like, well, I want to plant like 2 acres of vegetables. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, that's a horrible idea. That just makes me tired. Like, my back hurts after picking like my little like 20-foot row of green beans. Like, I couldn't. So you kind of want you to, but sometimes they don't know what 2 acres really is. Like, that's a big piece of real estate for certain things. So, and the next one, kind of thinking through like what kind of equipment is needed, or like infrastructure. With this type of a crop, equipment might be a tiller, like hand tools, pretty minimal equipment investment on a smaller scale. But as you grow, you might think of like, you know, investing in like a little walk behind tractor, like, you know, things, it can definitely scale up. And then infrastructure, and not so much buildings, but like, do I have water? Is it close to where I want to put my garden? Because if it's not, packing water is a huge pain. You know, is it close to my markets, or where am I going to sell, you know, versus where my product is being grown? And then that's kind of, you know, the last question too is, where am I going to go to sell? Am I going to have like a farm stand and hope to drive people to me? Am I in a highly visible location where I can do that? Or am I going to go to a farmer's market? Or am I going to, you know, have a shelf-stable product that I'm able to sell online? Or it could potentially go into a store somewhere. And then, you know, kind of thinking through all those pieces as well. So the second one that I picked is value-added foods and products. So I'm going to use your example of fermented because that's a perfect example. So when you add value, you're basically converting a raw commodity, so that raw cabbage or those raw cucumbers, you know, into a product that makes it more valuable. So, and then you're capturing the value when you sell it. So you can improve profitability if you have limited quantities. If you have, you know, an acre of cucumbers and you're able to pickle those cucumbers and sell them over the length of a year, that's going to be more profitable for you than having to unload them all when they're like freshly harvested, because then you have to move them or they're going to be worthless. Versus when you can sit on them, you can kind of take a little bit more dollar there. So with value-added foods and products, first thing you need to think of is like, how am I going to add value to the product? So is it going to be dried? In case of like, if you do herbs, like, are you able to, you know, dehydrate those herbs? You know, freeze drying is like, everybody's freeze drying things right now. That's a huge trend. You know, is that something you could potentially do with your product? You know, canning, or milling, if you wanted to mill down your own flour, or barley flour, or something that's just a little bit different. Drying seeds. There's just all kinds of different ways you can add value to products. The next thing is what regulations need to be followed. So I can speak to Missouri. Does anybody live on the Kansas side? No Kansans here. So, but there is a cottage law food guide for the state of Missouri, which is very helpful for like selling small scale. So it's $50,000 in less than sales is then you're considered cottage law, and that would be fresh fruits and vegetables, jams, jellies, fermented products do not fall under cottage law. So fermented products have to be produced in a licensed kitchen. So pickles, salsa, krauts, those types of things need to be done in a licensed kitchen. And that's going to those regulations vary by county. So if you're in Jackson County, not only do you have county regulations, you could have city regulations too. That could be even more stringent than county. So it's just really important to check with your local health departments on what those regulations are. And I always tell people, if you're thinking of doing something and it's a question whether or not you need to do it in a licensed space, just call the health department and ask. In this county, it's probably a little bit more frustrating than if you lived in very rural Missouri, where you've got like Martha, the health department lady that's been there for the last 30 years and everybody knows who she is kind of thing. But, you know, cities are just sometimes bureaucratic. Next thing to kind of think about with value added is making sure that like the cost of supplies and equipment is figured into like your final price, because you are going to have more input costs with those types of things. And then lastly is kind of like, you know, what can you sell, how much, where, and for what price. So kind of trying to figure out like, who's my customer, who's going to buy this, how do I get them to be aware of it, and then you know, how much can I ask. So we'll kind of dive into that here in a little bit too. So the last thing is agritourism. I'm not going to spend a lot on this because you guys are not really interested in agritourism. This is a big one that always comes up, like when I talk to people, like, oh, I'm going to have people out to my farm. I'm like, do you want people at your farm 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? No. I said, you don't want to do agritourism because they do not respect hours of operation, and they will knock on your front door when you're in the shower to ask you if they can come pick berries. Like, it doesn't matter. But, you know, that's just another way that you can kind of glean more dollars from your small farm. So again, there's a lot of special considerations with agritourism, because like you've all probably seen like the fun farm where you pay to get in. That is actually different income than income from farming. So there's some tax considerations there, huge liability and insurance risks with those types of things. And then there's can be permits and things like that you need to consider too. So now we're going to kind of shift gears into business planning, and then like I'm going to beat you over the head with this for the next however much time we have left. So you've set your goals. You're kind of like, I've really thought through what I want to do. I kind of know what it's going to take me to get there. I've got my space. I've got kind of how I'm going to do it figured out. So now it's kind of time to start some real like business planning and putting some numbers on some paper and figuring out, you know, is it going to cash flow? How much, you know, money or capital am I going to need to get this project started? And then like, where do I think I can sell it and for how much? And really kind of like putting those figures down and making sure that's going to be feasible. So that whole process is just, you know, kind of figuring out a guide for the future of your business. So sometimes people do this piece and they're like, it's just not going to work. I can't make it work. But that is considered a win than trying and losing thousands of dollars and then realizing that, you know, kind of like, an ounce of prevention is worth what is that saying? Yeah. Pound of cure. Yeah. Like after the fact, like if I would have done a little bit of this, you know, beforehand, instead of just jumping right in, I would have figured out a lot sooner and saved myself a lot of money and heartache. So, and this is just the details, and it's this piece, this profitability piece, this asset piece, and then the marketing piece, and they all kind of have to work together to be a successful business. So we kind of map it out, like I said, these three pieces. So marketing it's by far the hardest thing to do. And even I struggle sometimes with like, you know, how do you market? Like, who's your customer? Like, how am I going to differentiate my tomatoes from the like 10 other people that are selling tomatoes at this farmer's market? And then like, how do I price that to where I'm not underselling everyone, but I'm not pricing myself out of the market? How much are people willing to pay? And then, do I want to try to sell online, or do I want to just make 10 sales but maybe make more money, or make one sale and make less, but then I don't have that time invested in the effort it takes to try to go get those 10. Does that make sense? Because different people have different answers for that question. Some people are like, no, I don't mind dealing with customers. I don't mind going and sitting at the farmer's market every day or once a week for 5 or 6 hours. And other people are like, that is the last thing on earth that I want to do. I don't want to deal with people. I just want to do one stop and be done. So, you need to kind of figure those plans into what your preferences are, and then what makes sense financially for you too. So assets is just kind of like not only your capital assets, your money, your land, your equipment, but also your personal assets. So this is like, I've managed a business in the past. I understand how to do that. I just need to take what I've learned there, and apply it over here to this, because some things hold true across different businesses. And then the last thing is just figuring out your profitability, and that's really simple. That's just like, how much do I think am I going to make, and how much do I think it's going to cost, and does it make sense? So, kind of touched on marketing already. So you have to have demand for your product at a certain price, or it's just not going to fly. And then you kind of look at it two ways in agriculture. So you've got the commodity products. These are the corn, the soybeans, the cattle. And it would be awesome if we had more of a commodity base even for our horticulture crops, but we don't, because when I go to sell my cows, I know that I can haul my calves down to the livestock auction, and I'm going to probably get this much dollar per hundredweight when I sell those cows. Like, I know that floor exists. So there's security in that, right? I know that if I sell them off my farm, I could market them a little bit differently and I could potentially get more. But I know that I can load them up on Wednesday and I can go sell 1,000-pound steer, at $500 a hundredweight, or whatever the price is that day. And I know I'm going to have that to fall back on. So horticulture, small, specialty crop, value added, we're not so lucky there. We have to be, figure out what's the market going to bear, where can I go to sell it, and for where can I get the most money for what I'm selling. So probably a fact, someone over in Lenexa, Kansas is probably willing to pay more for a product than someone that lives in Rayville, Missouri. So it's kind of like figuring out those demographics and where can I go to get the most for what I am trying to sell. So with direct marketing, which is selling direct to the customer, there are pros and cons. You make more, you're gonna have customer interaction and feedback. When I sell my calves at the livestock auction, I'm probably never gonna know who bought them. I'm never gonna hear back from them as to like, what did they grade out at, or, did they turn into good mama cows for you? I'm not gonna know all that. But if I go and sell my tomatoes or my jam or jelly at the farmer's market, and the next week someone comes back and they said, oh my gosh, I made like the best BLTs with those tomatoes, or like that jam was so good, I need to get more, or it tasted a little sour. You get that customer feedback and those customer interactions. Some people don't like that. So like that could be a con too. That's why it's over there on the customer interaction side too. Some people are like, I don't really want to talk to people, but there's ways around like not having to have those customer interactions and still grow horticulture crops. But the con to the direct marketing is it's a really high time commitment. You have to cultivate those relationships, and that takes a lot of time. And I think sometimes as growers, they want to spend all their time growing, and the sales piece of it is almost an afterthought to them, as far as like, oh, well, I guess I have to get rid of it now. And really that should be the first thing before you ever put your hands in the soil is, how am I going to sell this? But they just like growing. And that's great if you're just donating it at the end of the day, because you can just grow and grow and grow and give and give and give. But sometimes you have to make a little bit so you can grow more. So talking about assets, this is what you bring to the enterprise. So this could be that half an acre of land, or I have all the tools I already need. I don't have to go buy a thing besides maybe some seed and maybe a little bit of fertilizer, and I'm good to go. It's also maybe your knowledge or prior experience, and not even necessarily directly related to farming, but it's those intangible business assets. So I had a conversation with a lady once, and she was like, I don't have really anything to bring to the table. This is my husband's idea. He's the one that wants to farm and grow and blah, 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 blah. And I just work in town. And I was like, oh, well, what do you do? Just kind of picking her brain. And she's like, oh, I'm an accountant and I like bookkeep for a bunch of businesses. And I'm like, that is like a huge, huge business asset, because I guarantee you your husband doesn't want to do that. So if you could, that's your contribution. Like that's a huge plus to have someone that understands it and is capable of doing that and likes to do it, because most farmers don't like to do that piece of it. So sometimes it's not always in front of your face, but you do have assets to bring to the table. So when you're planning, you kind of want to make two lists, like what do I have and what do I need? And then you connect the dots. And that's a really easy way to kind of start to begin. So I've got a tool that really helps you do this, kind of does it for you, that I'll share with you here in a few minutes. And I don't have my, the last bit is thinking about your profitability. So just revenue minus cost. So when I think of profitability and people are in their planning stages and starting to write everything down, always be very conservative when projecting revenue and be overzealous when projecting expenses. That's me. I'm pretty risk adverse. So like I'm always, conservative. But just kind of think about what you're going to sell for, what's the quantity you're going to be able to raise and sell at that price to calculate your revenue. And then your expenses are just going to be the cost of all your inputs. And then we do have some budgets that can help you think through that type of process to get out your expenses. Cash flow is really important in agriculture and agricultural businesses, because we cash flow differently than like someone that sells like a convenience store, an auto parts store, where it's like it's pretty consistent. There might be like seasonal gaps and lulls that you kind of expect, but agriculture is funny, and especially like specialty crops and growing, because all of your money goes out when?
Beginning of the season.
At the beginning of the season. And you don't make money until
Harvest time.
Exactly. So you've got this lull. So planning your cash flow and sitting down and thinking through, like strategically, like, okay, I know that in March and April, I'm going to be spending a lot of money that I'm not going to recoup until later in the year. And thinking through that, on an annual basis really kind of helps you plan how that year's going to flow and know how much do you need to hold back in reserve. There's ways you can market to help with that cash flow. Have anybody heard of CSAs, community supported agriculture? So that's an interesting model that where people like basically subscribe to your farm. So it might be like, okay, come join Happy Harvest Farms CSA, and every month or upfront we're going to bill you this much money, but then you're going to get a box of produce once a month for the growing season, and they might kind of give you a calendar that says, okay, well, in June and July, you're going to get squash and tomatoes and green beans, and then we're going to move into maybe some late summer crops and then some early fall crops, to where you kind of have an idea of what's going to be in your box, but you get a box of fresh produce once a week for that entire season. But that allows the producer to get more money up front when they're needing it at the beginning of the season. Some also successful CSA models have like a labor share component too, where they might say, okay, well, your box is going to be $500 for this, but if you come and donate so many hours of your time to help pick or wash or pack or whatever we're doing, then you get a reduced price. So it's a way to get some like free labor in return for, them coming to your farm and helping. So it's kind of an interesting model. It has mixed success, I think, depending on the organization of the farmer that's running it. I've seen some that like tank very quickly and others that just like go like wildfire. So it does require a little bit more hands-on, bookkeeping and some forethought. So if you're not a really good planner, it's probably not the way for you to go. But if you like planning and having people come out to your place, it could be a good revenue stream. So with cash flow, we kind of break it into 3 different types of activities. The first is operating, and that's just the day-to-day. So that's like, I've got chickens, I sell eggs. So every day I have egg sales, and I know that I'm gonna have to buy feed regularly. So there's like the regular ins and outs. And then you've got investing activities. So that might be something like, using that chicken example, is, okay, my birds are getting older, so I need to go and buy some new birds. I'm not buying new birds all the time, but every once in a while I gotta renew my flock. Or I'm gonna sell some like spent hens. They're done laying. I'm gonna sell them to someone that's gonna butcher them and use them to feed to their dogs or whatever. You don't wanna eat like a 4-year-old chicken. They're tough. And then financing activities that's just money that's associated with like borrowing or a capital injection. Like you might finance yourself. You might be like, okay, I'm working over here and I'm gonna take $1,000 out of my savings account and I'm gonna go and invest that in a new chicken coop. But I'm gonna pay myself back eventually, or that's a loan from the bank or something of that nature. So kind of figuring through those monies going in and out. So that's it for this presentation. So it takes a little bit of planning. I'll pass this handout out, but you just want to, kind of 3 steps, really simple. When you put it on paper, not so, requires a lot of thought and time and practice, but just, setting your goals, thinking through what enterprise you want to do, kind of the reasons behind it, and then kind of mapping your business plan, looking at your marketing, what your assets are, and what your revenues could be. So let's take like a quick break, stretch break, and then I'll show you a really cool tool that feeds into this really well that you can play with on your own time. Thank you. Okay, so if you can't remember, just Google Intel, and you have to type for ag, and it's going to be this one with the MU logo that pops up. So it's the second thing that pops up. So it's a really cool website that's really meant to walk us through all the things that we just talked about. And I didn't realize how well it went hand in hand with this presentation until I was reviewing everything this morning. So to get started, just hit get started. And the pictures change, but the menus stay the same. So it's going to take you down here, and you've got these 6 boxes that you can click on. So we'll just kind of steer through each of them. We'll spend some more time on certain ones than others. But this first one is Find My Sustainable Enterprise. So it lists a lot of different enterprises that you can do. So we're going to just choose fruits and vegetables, and we're going to say, you know what, I have an interest in doing strawberries. So you can choose your crop. It has animal products. It has different crops listed. And so then it's going to ask you questions. So you've kind of like got a piece of property in mind, and you think you might want to grow strawberries there. So this first question is, site requirements for producing strawberries include good soil drainage and air drainage. The location should have no plant residues, stone sticks, perennial weed pressure, and it shouldn't have recently grown strawberries, sod, or crops suspectable for verticillium. There you go. Wilt or other leaf. So The soil pH should range from 6 to 7. Do you have a suitable site? And you're like, well, I don't know. So we're going to say no to that question. Next question is your operation willing to invest in irrigation to provide consistent moisture to plants that have shallow root systems in an area prone to frost risk and warm temperatures and are willing to sprinkle irrigation as a tool to protect strawberries from frost and offer evaporation benefits? Okay, so I don't know about you all, but already I'm like, strawberries sound like they might be very needy little plants. But we're going to say, yeah, we'll do all that stuff. Strawberry production relies on hand labor. Do you have access to labor? Yeah, I do. So we'll say yes to that one. Strawberries have a short post-harvest life. Do you have ready access to a market that can quickly make use of strawberries? And you say, yes, I do. And then, are you willing to identify and choose strawberry cultivars suited to your operation's local growing conditions? So we're going to say yes to that one too. So, and you can calculate your score. So depending on how you answer all of those questions, it's going to tell you like, yes, you should pursue this product, or no, this one might not be a good idea for you. So if you decided like, no, or like, strawberries sounded great to me before I clicked on this quiz, and all of a sudden now these plants are like needy, horrible drama queens that I don't want to grow, then you're like, okay, strawberries, draw a line through that. We're not going to do those. So it's just a good way to kind of figure out what you want to grow. So, and you can play with it and go through all different types. So you can take all, it's, you kind of feel like it's those like personality quizzes, or like, it's like a Cosmo quiz for vegetables.
Have you seen that
which
Gordon
area?
Ramsay show where he travels around and he visits, I think he's kind of trying to do like Anthony Bourdain, but he visited a grower of strawberries in Japan, where of course they kind of take things to levels of extreme.
They like,
We don't
were they
know.
square strawberries?
No, but they were, I think he was selling them for like thousands of dollars for on a single punnet. Like the one berry was like, $50 to $100 or something that he would sell it for.
Mm-hmm. Crazy.
And yeah,
It was just, what was so special about it?
the flavor.
It's like
It
they,
is their culture, so they have.
Oh, yeah,
They have this thing that even if you're a janitor, you hone your skill, right? And people, the consumer will value that. And sometimes for fruits and vegetables in Japan, they do auctions for special products, and that's when you see the high price.
Are they crazy about Kobe beef and tuna?
Oh yeah, you can get to it.
so the next piece is land suitability. So, sorry, the internet's being a little bit slow. Okay. This one will let you kind of map where your farm is, or where your piece of ground is that you're wanting to grow, and it will tell you whether or not what you're wanting to grow there is suitable for the soil type and what is there. So for this one, let's say we're going to try to do watermelon. Has anyone ever tried to grow watermelons?
They need a lot of water.
They're kind of a,
You're kind of a drama queen.
yeah, so let's say we're gonna do watermelons in Jackson
Can
County.
intensify that flavor.
So it's gonna pull up
This website's crazy.
Jackson County, and it's gonna show you on the maps, like the suitability for that crop. And you can scroll in, you can put an address in and it'll drill down to the exact address. So Jackson County is highly suitable for growing watermelons. So it's this dark green color, and then on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that dark green is highly suitable. So it's kind of neat that it tells you those types of things. Oh, now it's starting to feed in. So I spoke too soon because
We're in a drought.
we're buffering. And so parts of the county are good, some parts are suitable, some are moderately suitable, and some are slightly suitable.
What's it
And,
based off of? Like soil and or
soil types,
are these
infrastructure,
drought?
things like that. So like with this county being very urban, like it kind of knows where
A
it's
lot of
gonna-
local
there's,
watermelons are growing bottoms.
yeah, and so and you can see like if you blow out on these maps, like you can almost see like where the
Parks
like
are.
river bottoms and things like that are, where the soils change. So just kind of another tool to put in your toolbox and play with.
I think if you click on an area, it's going to give you more information on the soil.
Yeah. And it's got precipitation, growing days. You can click on these different temperature, soil drainage, soil pH. Like you can click on these different factors and filter and look at all these different, contributions to whether or not that area is good to grow a certain crop.
How big this database is.
So it pulls from a lot of different databases. Move this little bar around.
It's pretty crazy.
Technology's pretty.
Yeah.
50 years ago, you just had to go find the old dude down and ask him.
My front yard is suitable for watermelon.
That whole state map is unsuitable,
Yeah.
except for the river.
So the next piece is market intelligence. So this is a neat tool to kind of, what's our address here? 8845 Troost? Something like that?
8901 East 89,
8901
Okay.
East 89.
East 89.
So you can search by address. It's going to pull up where you're at. And then you got to drop a point. You have to drop a pin on the map. So we'll just say here it's going to be good enough. So then it's going to drop a pin on your map, and it's going to load your market intelligence report for that area. So you can filter by radius. So how big or small do you want to shrink that area that it's going to pull data from? And so it's going to tell you the population of the state, the population of the nearest community, which is Kansas City, the county population, and then your market area population. So within 30 miles radius of where we're at, there's 1.979 million people. So the next thing it's going to tell you about is what are the farmers markets close to you. So it's going to tell you and I do recommend checking to make sure that these markets are still active. Some may be a seasonal market. This data was good as of January of 2024. It lists the source underneath each of the data points. So, but markets sometimes are just a little finicky. So just, you don't show up at 101 Southeast Douglas Street going, here's the farmer's market, and there's nothing there. But still, it gives you a good starting point to say, I've done my market, I want to grow strawberries, I can grow strawberries, I have the right soils to grow strawberries, I have the capability, and 30 miles from my farm, I have 5 farmers markets that I can potentially sell at. So it kind of starts to strengthen that value proposition, strengthen that, that business proposal. So, and then it lists other potential buyers. So if you wanted to sell to restaurants, there's 571 restaurants within a 30-mile radius of us. There's 150 grocery stores. So it lists different, other buyers that potentially are out there. So it talks about household income. It gives you demographics as it relates to race and ethnicity and age. And then it has these cool food demand estimates. And this, I think, is just kind of interesting. So right now it's on animal products. So who would have guessed that the estimated annual consumption per person of beef is 53 pounds?
We love beef here.
Yep. And if you add beef, chicken, and pork together, you are consuming roughly 175 pounds of meat a year per person. That's a lot of meat.
In hot dogs alone.
Or if someone told you January 1st you're gonna eat 40 pounds of cheese in the next year. So I just kind of find, if you're like, I'm kind of a numbers geek, so if you like to geek out on just random numbers, this is kind of a fun thing to look
I
at.
definitely eat 60 pounds of bacon.
But then you also can do,
So good.
you can drop down to fruit and vegetables. So who thinks is
Aquaponics is a bad business. See?
yeah, only 2.8 pounds, or it's an untapped market. You never know. So on fruit, who do you, or what does everybody think the #1 fruit consumed is?
Apples?
Oh,
Grapes?
bananas.
Bananas.
Apples,
Ooh, apples.
40.2 pounds. Bananas don't even make the list.
I think those are.
But we can't grow bananas in Missouri, so.
I do eat a lot of apples.
And then, okay, so #1
Watermelons is
vegetable.
Tomato.
I say tomato.
Yeah,
Green beans.
that's pretty easy. Tomatoes, 89 pounds of tomatoes, with potatoes in second and onions in third. So, it was funny, I got to go to the Bahamas. We had a grant, we were able to go to the Bahamas to teach farming. I taught something very similar to this over there. And tropical climate, what do you think they wanted to grow?
Probably something like potatoes.
Potatoes, because they wanted fish and chips. They don't have soil in the Bahamas. They have rocks and sand. So it's like you could grow papaya and pineapple and all of these tropical fruits, and you want to grow potatoes.
Well, you know, South America, that's good.
So this is just something neat you can play with to kind of see what, food preferences are. Here it talks about beefsteak, and, we've got a little bit more data on meat than we do on vegetables for certain things. But that is the,
So those are the things that they value. When they see that in the label, they will be more.
yeah.
more
Potatoes and tomatoes are both like newcomers to agriculture too, relatively, as far as like worldwide agriculture. Because potatoes didn't come into play until like after they got introduced from South America. So they're pretty new on the market, and I don't think people chose to cultivate tomatoes because they thought they were poisonous
Yeah.
for a long time.
They thought it was nightshade.
Well, they're both in the
So now they're both.
That was
the
before they
top
invented
two-
ketchup.
That's the top two.
Yeah.
Top two consumed. Yeah, French fries and ketchup, right
Have you
there.
ever had sunchokes? At one time, they were way more popular than potatoes,
Yeah.
but potatoes are more uniform looking. 'cause you
So
get the beard.
that was market intelligence. Management resiliency, this is kind of a neat one too, where it talks about different enterprises and assessing them. So we're going to do specialty crops. So horticulture crops, all that is considered specialty crops. So it's going to help you assess your management capabilities. And it's going to kind of ask these questions as far as, can I tolerate carrying inventory? And then you say, no, I can't, or yes, I can. So let's go back to our strawberry example earlier. So we found out that strawberries are highly perishable. I don't have a way to preserve them yet. I don't have a way to do that. So I can't carry much inventory there because they're going to go bad. But I have like 20 kids that can pick the strawberries for me. So my family does provide me with access to labor. I'm pretty comfortable speaking on the phone. Bargaining is a thrill for me. Not really. I don't really like negotiating or bargaining, so let's give that one a 3. I'm comfortable managing employees. Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. I'm comfortable with a debt to asset ratio of greater than 50%. So this is kind of what is your feelings towards taking on debt or having to carry debt. I don't want to carry debt that like gives me ulcers. So I'm going to rate that one as a 2. I love attending farm-related seminars because I love extension people. So I'm going to give that one a 10. I keep verifiable production and management records. Yeah, I'm a geek with that. I really enjoy doing that stuff. So we just kind of go through and we pick, answers to all of these questions that it's going to ask. And I'm not going to do this for all of these because we don't have to go through 25 questions. But then you hit calculate, and it kind of tells you based on your answers to these questions where your management competency is and where do you need to work. Like, okay, I'm really good at production, but I'm going to need to get some help, or I'm going to need to like add some tools to my toolbox for finances, labor, sales, and marketing. And then it's going to give you some tips and things on the other side there where it says download to learn more about those different areas of it. So just kind of a way to do some self-assessments there of where you're at with those different management competencies. Okay, we're almost done. Next one is the Knowledge Center. This one is really cool because this is where there is just like a treasure trove of resources. So fruits and vegetables, we're gonna go to that one, and then we're gonna go to resource. So with every different vegetable, it's gonna give you a production guide, a machinery and equipment guide of what you're going to need to produce those vegetables, and a resource list. So let's just, for example, look at the apple machinery and equipment guide.
I needed this when I tried to do veterans VR&D program. They asked me to like put a business plan together. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so you're like, I don't really know what
This
I
is
need.
perfect.
Like,
Yeah.
oops, sorry. So this is gonna tell you like, you're gonna need a moldboard plow. Like, I didn't even know what a moldboard plow was, but I need to go figure out what that is. You know, you're gonna need a fertilizer spreader. So it just kind of, you know, tells you here, you know, I'm gonna need a tractor, I'm gonna need a moldboard plow, I'm gonna need a subsoiler, I'm gonna need a disc, I'm gonna need a harrow, like, you know, to get these apple trees in the ground. And then it gives you all these resources with links to where you can do a deeper dive into what was written here on this page. So, you know, it's just, like I said, it's a wealth of information on all different types of products. You could spend hours and hours and hours just reading.
How much cheaper is it to splice your own apple trees as compared to just getting them and planting them?
So the next and the last piece of this is the business startup. So you've kind of done all your other homework, you've really read up, you've studied, you're like, okay, I'm ready to pull the trigger, I'm ready to go. And that's where we're gonna head next with a presentation. But this gives you a handy dandy checklist. So I've got that printed off here, but you can create your business startup checklist. And it's going to ask you a few questions. So yeah, we're gonna make a profit. I'm just gonna check on these so I can get to the list. I don't need financing. Oh, that's fine. Yes. Boop, boop, boop. Yes, okay. No, all right. Boop. And then you get this fancy, I'll shrink it down a little bit so you can see it. Boop. Checklist.
Did they hand these out?
Yeah, if you want to, thank you. That kind of has a task, you know, so I need to identify state and local regulations. I need to choose a business structure, but then embedded in these tasks are links, so if you need more information on something, you can go to a link. So you've got those in front of you, so you can kind of look through all those different pieces. Another thing is it lets you calculate a break-even analysis, so you can figure out like where you need to be on prices to track your input cost and projected sales to kind of help you figure out what does that break-even price need to be. And then it does, the third piece of this that I'm not going to get into tonight is a market channel cost assessment. So if you look at that, you can compare like, what's it going to cost me to sell at a farmer's market versus selling through a CSA versus selling at a farm stand. And it's gonna like walk you through those pieces of those different types of markets that you can sell at, and it tells you what it's gonna cost, because there's always that cost of doing business. So that's a neat piece too. So this site really helps you build upon some of the ideas and concepts that we talked about tonight, but it lets you kind of really work at your own pace, and it's just a wealth of information. So I wanted to kind of take some time and walk you through that site because it is very useful. So I just wanted to talk to a few things. They are in that checklist, but I just wanted to talk, you know, speak to a few things on like the actual nuts and bolts of starting a small business, because that's like very overwhelming to some people. And I always get this question too, that it's like, well, when am I actually in business? And I'm like, well, there's not like a clear-cut answer to that, like especially in agriculture, because technically agriculture is the selling, like as soon as you sell a commodity, like you make that transaction for the intent of being profitable, that's kind of like what defines starting the business. But then there's all these other pieces that kind of play into that too. So I just kind of wanted to touch on a few things of, it's just kind of the nuts and bolts of getting started with actually like, okay, I'm ready to launch, I'm actually ready to like operate this idea, you know, as a business. And even if it's like a nonprofit type of a business, a nonprofit is still a form of a business entity, so you'd want to do things in a way that's business-like. So I don't know what's going on. Okay, now we're going. Okay, so the first thing, like, you know, I ask people is, are you operating as a business? So believe it or not, the IRS has some handy dandy questions you can ask yourself, and that will, you know, yes or no might indicate I am operating as a business or no, I'm not. The next thing kind of is to choose your business entity. So that's, am I going to be a sole proprietorship? Do I need to form an LLC? I get that question a lot. Or, you know, am I a nonprofit? And then kind of the last piece is accounting and record keeping. And that's just kind of like that management piece of it. So, you know, our friends at the IRS have kind of kind of laid out some things. So they say that if you are operating as a business, your activities must be regular. So you must be doing them consistently, continuously. It's not something you're picking up and setting down as your, you know, kind of whim leads you. And then you're conducting them to earn a profit. So they have these, what they call the hobby factors in determining this. And they do kind of help frame out whether or not I'm doing something that is a business or something else. So number one, is the activity carried out in a business-like manner? This is pretty simple. It's like, you know, am I selling something, or am I giving away more than I'm selling? Am I trying to make money? You know, those types of things. Like, are you conducting yourself, you know, a way that a business would operate? Does the taxpayer or the farmer here have the expertise needed to conduct business? So if someone went out and bought a 1,000-acre farm and never drove a tractor or never drove a combine or anything like that and lost a ton of money but wanted to take a tax write-off, they might say, like, you didn't really have the expertise needed to conduct this business in a profitable way. You never intended to get the expertise. And so, no, you know, that might be an example of not. But if you're like, you know, I did this class and I went and I volunteered over here and I still lost money, but I've done everything the way I'm supposed to, then yeah, you were a business, you know, you weren't just out there, you know, kind of winging it, so to speak. Makes sense? So is the time and effort the taxpayer or the farmer puts into the activity show they intend to make a profit? So, you know, you spend a lot of time on something, obviously that's intent. If it's something that you only invest, you know, an hour or two of your time in a week or a month, maybe not so much. Do you expect to make future profits from the appreciation of assets used in the activity? So this is really around like mostly pertaining to land. So, you know, maybe not something, but most people, when they buy a large asset like land, they would hope that that would appreciate over time. So they're not looking to, you know, sell something at a loss at a later date or things like that.
How old are these?
This is as
new,
recent as the IRS. I don't know when the last time the IRS has reviewed these, but
when
yeah.
The farm aid thing was going on, I had relatives that weren't even growing anything that the government was paying for failed crops.
Subsidy.
Yeah. So the 80s there was a major farm crisis in the 80s where land all of a sudden overnight became worth much less than it was. Crops weren't worth anything. A lot of farmers went under. So yeah, that was definitely a time of crisis for
Yeah, but
agriculture.
I'm saying somewhere along the line, somebody figured out that there were people that were profiting in a situation where they shouldn't have been. Like I had relatives that weren't even farmers that were getting money from the government because they didn't have producing crops on their 80 acres or whatever. You know, so now I'm thinking that the IRS is going, well, this guy wasn't really intended to make a profit.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of these questions, like, I do a whole presentation on like hobby versus like farming, and we cover a lot of like cases that is like an example of, you know, farmer A has done XYZ, like, you know, they purchased a cattle farm. Basically, they're trying to crack down on the people that are kind of using agriculture as a tax write-off for something else. So.
You don't get to,
Yeah, like we always tell
launder
people,
your
like,
money.
yeah,
Right.
if you've been in business for 10, 15 years filing a Schedule F, which is income from farming or profit from farming, and every one of those 15 years you've operated at a loss, that might be a flag that they're going to maybe do an audit on you, because after 15 years, you need to show, even if it's $1 profit, you know, you need to show that you're trying to conduct that business in a sustainable way. So number 5, the taxpayer is successful in making a profit from similar activities in the past. So even if you lost money, say like, I'm trying to think of an example of this, like you were a melon farmer and you transitioned into doing a different crop. And you were a successful melon farmer, but then you transitioned over to farming berries, but you had a crop failure. Like you were successful in the past doing similar activities, so that would kind of like lead us to believe that you are going to be successful or are trying to be successful, you know, doing these new activities. So is there a history of losses with respect to, yeah, so if you have those year after year after year of losses, they might kind of ask them, is this really being, you know, is this truly a farm for profit?
So I know some farmers that they refuse to pay taxes. So towards the end of the year, if they made a profit, they'll purchase a new tractor.
That's a game. Well, I mean, everyone plays that game, not just farmers. Really, any business owner. You know, I shouldn't bring politics in it, so I'm not going to. Yeah, no, but like, so any business, like you're sitting in the fourth quarter, and you know, you're like, oh my gosh, like if I don't do something, I'm gonna have to pay taxes on $150,000 worth of income. And so what can I do to make my tax burden less? Well, I have $150,000 over here that I need to get off the books. What if I go and I know that looking out here, I could buy a new baler or a new tractor or even a used piece of equipment. So now all of a sudden, like I take that 150, I go buy a $100,000 tractor, and then all of a sudden I go from $150,000 profit to $50,000 profit that I'm paying taxes on. So you're just kind of moving things around to appear like you don't have quite as much in the bank.
Do farmers not file quarterly?
They don't have
Other
to.
Businesses, okay, that's what I was wondering if they were exempt or something. Because I know when I ran, I like just even a little I-9 business, if I had been getting a certain
Some
deduction
will.
the whole time, I would
It really
expect
depends
to
on their
file.
business structure, but most do not file quarterly. Because most farmers don't have employees, or they have, you know, one employee.
And their stuff isn't quarterly.
Yeah.
Chopped up in a way, I guess.
So do you depend on your income for the activity for their livelihood? Most farmers don't. Most farmers have W-2 income or off-farm income. They're depending on, you know, there might be a spouse that works off-farm, so they're not necessarily depending on that for their livelihood. But if they are, if that's their only source of income, that's a very good indicator that they are actually trying to do, like, you know, a farming business. And then, is the likelihood of profit small compared to the personal gratification of the activity? Like, if I really love goat yoga, so I go and buy like a whole herd of goats, but I'm not making like any money at all, like, but my personal gratification is through the roof. Like that's a horrible example, but still like you're getting, that's your hobby that isn't really a business. You just really enjoy doing that. Yeah. Or miniature cattle.
Wow.
I once told someone that they should eat their miniature cattle. That was not the right thing to say. I'm like, well, what are you gonna do with all the steers? And they're like, I said, are you gonna eat them? And she's like, no. I'm like, well, they're not livestock, they're pets. Like, it's
Fixed and everything. I guess they would call it fixed, but they had it castrated, just like, wow.
So, yeah.
Bigger miniature cattle. I don't know.
Little.
Can you have
Oh, they're idiot, yeah, they're like a whole thing.
Vicious rodeo?
Huh?
If you kept some that weren't steers and you had a miniature rodeo, how vicious are those? Are the bulls?
Yeah,
How vicious are those bulls?
Well,
If you let them.
roosters are pretty vicious, so I would imagine a small bull would be pretty vicious too.
Yeah. Miniature animals.
I didn't even know, I'm gonna have to look that up when I get
Oh, there's a whole,
I mean, I know
That's a
miniature
rabbit hole.
ponies.
Yeah.
Well,
Like-
miniature horses, miniature.
I haven't seen them lately, but there for a while, like there was all kinds of like TikToks and like little Instagrams of like people with like miniature cows in their house. And it's like they look so adorable. What they don't show you is them like crapping all over your white carpet. Like
Right.
really, they are not potty trained. Like they,
You ever watch Arnold Schwarzenegger's videos with his miniature horses?
oh,
They're hilarious. He has these series of videos where they live in his house with him. 2 miniature horses, and they're always coming up, and I don't know, usually when he's drinking
Yeah.
or something, and they're getting their face into his.
any animal that is smaller than what it's supposed to be is like infinitely more obnoxious.
Yes.
There's a direct relation to size and attitude, I believe. So choosing your business entity type. Get a lot of questions on this, like, oh, I think I need to go form an LLC because I need to protect all my assets. And I'm like, well, do you have any assets? No. Okay. But really, by far, the most common thing is just your sole proprietorship. That's just hanging out the "we're open" sign. I'm going to do business as myself. It's the easiest, fastest way to start your business. The business is you. You can do a fictitious name with a sole proprietorship. So you could be Tiny Bull Farm, but it's still a sole proprietorship. You've just created a fictitious name that you filed with the Secretary of State. That's Tiny Bull Farm.
Is that the DBA, is that part of that? Like,
Yeah, doing business as or fictitious name registration, yes. They're kind of interchangeable terms. I think the Secretary of State site in Missouri, it's a fictitious name registration there. So some advantages of the sole proprietorship kind of thing, it's very simple to set up. You are the sole decision maker on your business. It's very easy tax preparation with farming. You just file a Schedule F with your personal tax returns. Some of the disadvantages is you can be held personally liable for like something that, like say your Tiny Bull Farms, your Tiny Bull gores somebody, yeah, then you could be personally liable for that. It lacks investors, and then you're solely responsible for the success or failure, which that could still be, true for other types of entities as well. Partnerships, so 2 or more owners. Partnerships have their own EIN, which is employee identification number. So that's just a number that you file with the IRS that kind of like goes with the business, not necessarily, it doesn't go with a person. These are pass-through entities. So the partners pay taxes on their share. So example of this is like our farm is a family farm. We own 50% of the cattle herd, and my father-in-law owns 50% of the cattle herd. So we're a partnership in a way, but we split everything 50-50. So when it comes time to do our taxes, we file our own Schedule F. My father-in-law files his own Schedule F with just 50% split down the middle of the expenses and the profit on the farm. So you're personally liable for debts, lawsuits, and judgments in a partnership. And if you're doing business, most people don't do this. We don't do this on our family farm. We probably should. We don't. Practice what I preach, not what I do. You want to have a strong written agreement. If it's spouses are a little different because in Missouri, like your spouses, like you share marital assets kind of thing. But like say you do a partnership with your best friend, it might just be good, even if it's just on like a piece of notebook paper that the two of you sign that says like, we're in business 50-50, or, you know, Betty is providing the land and I'm going to pay for all of this, and we valued the land at this much, and this is this much. So that way it's just a clear understanding on paper. So if something goes sideways, you've got some documentation to kind of, you know, reflect what that agreement originally was. Next one is the limited liability company. This is another pass-through type of an entity. You need to file articles of organization with the Secretary of State. In that checklist, there is a link to the Secretary of State's website for Missouri. And it's a pretty simple articles of organization form. If you have a fairly simple LLC, you can just kind of like, it's like a fill in the blank. Taxes are filed like a sole proprietorship or a partnership. So you're going to file your taxes, Schedule F, personal tax returns, and then LLCs shield members from personal liability. So it will provide you a level of protection. But what is going to happen in a lawsuit if someone sues you is their attorney is going to say, okay, here's an LLC. It's Happy Bull LLC. We're going to go on the Secretary of State's website and we're going to look at the articles of organization and we're going to see who are the members of that LLC, who are the owners. We're going to sue Happy Bull Farm and we're going to sue Mr. Happy Bull himself because we want to get the most for our client. Does that make sense? So what LLCs might do is they might protect like farm assets. So it might kind of say like encapsulate the farm, you know, but they could still try and get you for some personal liability as well too. So you do want to have an operating agreement to determine how the business will make production and financial decisions. So again, it's just like some written down guidelines of like, if there's 3 people involved in LLC, you need a vote 2 out of the 3 to make a purchase over $1,000, or, you know, that might be something that you put in your operating agreement, or profits will be split 30, 40%. You know, those types of things would go in an operating agreement. So this is just kind of shows all the different business structures, a brief description, and then just kind of a way to kind of look at all of them on one slide and compare. We don't see a lot of corporations, especially like at the small business level. Typically just LLCs, partnerships, or sole proprietorships. Register your business with the Secretary of State. That's just the website there again. If you're doing business as or a DBA, you do need to get that fictitious name registration. And you can also do a business name search. So before you name your business, buy all the swag, get your website, open your Facebook page, only to find out at the very end that there's another farm out there and you can't use that name, do a quick business search to make sure that someone else hasn't used that name already. Just a little bit on employee identification numbers. You can get it at irs.gov. Do not pay anybody to get an EIN. They are completely free. It takes less than 5 minutes. When you type in, if you Google search like get an EIN, there will be like some paid sites that filter to the top. Be very careful where you click. Make sure you're clicking on a .gov. Some people like to get an EIN even if they have a sole proprietorship, if they're not comfortable putting their social security number out there. It's just another level of protection there. So anyone can get an EIN, sole proprietorship, LLCs, all of those different entities can get one. It's just, you don't have to. You only need to get one for those partnerships, but again, some people just like to have that level of protection or that buffer. The reason why some people do, and I don't think I have it in this slide deck, but like Missouri has a sales tax exempt form. So when you purchase your agricultural inputs for your farm, you can do tax exempt. So it's a 149, MO 149 form. It will ask you for your social security number or your EIN. You check a box that says agriculture, you sign the bottom of it, and then the merchant where you're purchasing your goods from, if that's the local co-op or seed store, they'll keep those on file. So some people are like, I don't really want my social security number sitting in a drawer that's not locked, like somewhere that I don't have control. So that's just a good example of why you might want one. So again, kind of covered this already, got a little ahead of myself, but if you're a corporation partnership, they do require one. LLCs and sole proprietorships don't. You do have to have an EIN though if you're doing employees. If you hire employees, you need that EIN so the government knows where to get its tax money from. And then just a little bit on accounting and record keeping to round out everything that I have for you. So I'm getting done way early, but it's hard to talk for 3 hours and keep you all like entertained. So business basics, and this is like very, very basic. Get a separate checking account. Do not operate your business out of your personal account. One, it's just super messy, but it's also one of those things that indicate that, hey, I'm doing this for profit with the intent to be a business. So you don't have to open a savings account. You can if you want to. So first off, get a checking account. And then kind of the next thing you need to do way early on is decide on a financial record keeping system. Just like, how am I going to track my inventory? How am I going to, if I have employees, do I need to plan those tax payments? Because employees do have to if you have employees, you do have to file wage taxes, employee taxes quarterly. But also, this is a lot easier to do, like, before you hitch the cart to the horse versus like getting down the road a ways and going like, oh man, like I didn't keep track of this in the get-go and now I'm gonna have to go back and think about it. It just is really best to get that done, start doing that from the very beginning. So as far as the records go, you want to keep receipts for all your items purchased for your business. It's kind of a no-brainer. Just figure out a system that works for you. And what the most basic system you can do, and I meant to print one off tonight, but I didn't, is just start with that Schedule F. It has itemized categories of how you track your income coming in and your expenses going out. And if you kind of start to lump your expenses and income that reflect those categories on the Schedule F, it makes it really easy come tax time to just plug those numbers in to the Schedule F. So just some examples for a livestock operation, those categories might be feed, veterinary, supplies, and maintenance. For horticulture, you're going to have your fertilizer, your seed, supplies, herbicide, chemicals. Plus then you can also see like, where's your money going, what categories, and as you start to build year after year, you can say like, why did I spend so much this year, versus the previous year? Well, maybe we were coming out of a drought, so like your nutrient management suffered a little bit during that drought year and you need to bulk up a little bit more on your fertilizer the following year, kind of thing. Keep your records for amount sold and your income received. And that could be as simple as if you go to the farmer's market, take one of those little receipt books with you and just write down like, $10 and what they bought real quick on that. You tear it out, give the customer a copy. You've got a copy saved there for yourself as well. And then on other record keeping that doesn't necessarily need to be done for, tax purposes or business tracking purposes, but will be like invaluable to you as you like progress in your agricultural career, is keeping track of things like planting dates, yields, locations of where you planted things, because then you don't have to like try to remember in your brain what you've done, but like making sure your crops are getting rotated. We had a really early year last year and we planted 3 weeks before we did this year, kind of thing. Or how come our tomatoes are really suffering this year? We got so much more last year. You can kind of start to like troubleshoot yourself and answer, maybe some questions before they, arise as far as what you're doing and when you're doing it. And those just can be really helpful to you. We have this little book my husband does for our cattle. It's like this big, and it's like a pocket guide, and he keeps it in his pocket. It's like a little day planner. So like I guarantee you, in that, like when I go home tonight, if I open that little book up, he's gonna have in there written like preg checked cows, 60X open, 60, like, and so he's gonna have everything that happened today that the vet said, he's gonna have written down, in that little book. And then he can say like, okay, we had 4 cows open this year, so last year we only had 1 open, so do we need to make a change on a bull? So it just, or we've got bull 3042 turned out with these cows, but he was turned out with this set of mature cows last year and did better. So it just kind of is like helps us with our planning and trying to think, because we wouldn't remember all that like off the top of our heads. It's just way too much to keep track of. So, and this is just kind of an example of like that inventory planning or that record keeping. So this just kind of walks you through like a hoop house. And in this example, they've listed their crops that they're growing. They say how much growing area they've devoted to each of those crops, the total length of row feet, like what they expect to get every year in a 3-season or a 4-season, like kind of, I would say not rotation, but growing table. Like I'm in a hoop house, so I know I'm gonna have 3 different crops or 4 different crops of this every year. We're gonna kind of try to put a value on those crops, and then we're gonna figure out what our costs are on 3 versus 4 season. And then it'll kind of start to tell you, if I subtract my value of my yield, $8,515 over my input on a 3-season, like what my anticipated profits might be. So it's kind of a way to kind of plan, but also kind of keep some records at the same time of the inventory on this particular hoop house. So creating a budget, it's important because it kind of helps you, one, figure out what your expected costs are, but also kind of figure out what your income's going to look like. It helps you plan the growing season, and then it helps you set benchmarks and comparisons for year after year, profit and losses. We don't have a great specialty crop budget for this state. We are working on it. I'm working on a record keeping tool that will help with all of these things. We have 2 examples up here. One is a specialty crop. This first one looks at specialty crops by crop, which I don't feel like is very realistic for most people, because most people aren't growing just one thing. They're doing 5 or 10 different crops in a growing season. So I really like the second one, which is a market garden budget, and it lets you plug in like, I did this many row feet of tomatoes and this many row feet of peppers, and this is how much I'm going to sell them for. And it's a much more comprehensive budgeting and record keeping tool. So that one's pretty good to check out. So, and we've kind of talked about what to budget, just your variable expenses. Those are going to change year to year. Seed, fertilizer, soil amendments. Your fixed expenses don't change over time. That could be insurance, rent, you know what that's going to be every month. So, and then obviously you budget your income. So, kind of talked about setting prices already. I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on that. We talked about cash flow. This is just kind of like a graphical representation of tracking cash flow throughout the year. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be something simple that you draw out on a piece of ledger paper or in an Excel program or a spreadsheet where you put your cash in every month, how much did you make, what's your total. So cash in would be like your balance carried forward every month in your checking account. And then what's your deposits for the month, or where did you show income coming in, the totals of that, what's your cash out categorized, and then what's your ending cash at the end of each month. And you'll see that start to like ebb and flow throughout the year. And then this is a Schedule F. It's tiny, I know, but you can see here just the different categories. So part 1 is your farm income. So there it lists like sales of purchased livestock, sales of livestock, produce, grains, or other products. So, you know, most everybody in here would have that number 2 because you're doing produce or other products. And then other types of income you could receive, like if you participate in federal or state programs, which you're doing ABCs of the USDA here in a couple weeks, and so you'll get to talk to all the government folk. And then like if you had crop insurance, you know, there, you know, if you had some custom hire income, someone paid you to go till their garden or to go pick their crop, that would go there as well too. And then expenses here, you know, car or truck expenses, using your personal vehicle to drive to those farmers markets, you know, there's expenses there. Fertilizer, gas for the tiller, you know, interest if you had to go and buy something and you financed it through the bank, that interest is tax deductible. Rent or lease, vehicles or land, repairs, it just lists all these different categories. So like I said, that Schedule F sometimes would be a really good way to like wrap your head around what do I need to track, and then like where do I put my income and my expenses, so that when it comes time for tax season, it's just a fill, it starts to just be like a fill in the blank. So I'm gonna trip over the chair now, and I think that's it. I just wanted to tag the last one on there. So that was kind of like a hard and fast starting your business, but a lot of what I covered is in that checklist with links to supporting documentation and all of the like websites you would need.